Let's return to Live from the State Capitol with Fred Dicker here on Talk 1300.
And welcome back to the State Capitol, where there's a spirited conversation that's been going on off-air between Eric Schneiderman, senator from New York City, who's the deputy majority leader under the Democratic lights right now, who's the chairman of the Codes Committee. He's a scholar on legislative affairs here. Austin Shafron's here as well, who's the press secretary, communications director to the, I'm not quite sure to who, Malcolm Smith and John Sampson. Certainly the Democrats in the Senate, and he too was joining in the conversation about just all the different permutations of what could happen around here. Senator Schneiderman, let me just ask you quickly on that question of the casting vote, because I think that may be important in a lot of what's going on around here. The possibility that if Pedro Espada is declared the president of a Senate, or if Malcolm Smith retains the position of president of a Senate, that one of them could cast a second vote, cast a vote both as a senator as well as the president of the Senate, which seems to be provided for in interpretations of the state constitution and in the rules that govern the activities here in the legislature. What about that? What do you think?
Well, we looked at this issue when Governor Patterson moved from lieutenant governor to governor, because the actual structure of the law and the Constitution is that the lieutenant governor has a casting vote. Right. That can break a tie in the Senate. When there is no lieutenant governor, there's never been any determination by any court that the temporary president of the Senate gets a second vote. It's a pretty it's a stretch, Fred. I mean, we've looked at the issue when
it says in Mason's that it's certainly possible. It's one of the guides that's used.
No, but it's
in Black's Law.
No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't. This is a power of the lieutenant governor. So what you're looking at is something that doesn't take into account the provisions of the New York State Constitution. There's no authority for the proposition that this power of the lieutenant governor devolves to the Senate president. So we looked at the issue.
Well, in the Constitution, doesn't it say that when there's no lieutenant governor, the president of the Senate has the responsibilities of a lieutenant governor?
But not powers. It's a very strange provision. We could go to court on it, yeah. but I think my view, based on our research in other states where this has come up, is that a court would be unlikely to say that Pedro Espada gets to be the president of the Senate and have two votes.
Well, if that's the case, though, and just a last point on this one, if that's the case, why did your revised proposed settlement or agreement with the Republicans that was put out last night contain as one of its points a ban on casting votes?
No, I think that's a very good point.
Because if you weren't concerned about it, you wouldn't have put it in there, it seems to me.
I think what we're trying to do is just the bipartisan operating agreement for the state Senate that was sent by Senator Sampson and Senator Smith over to the Republicans and Senator Espada last night proposes to break this gridlock by providing for a conference committee to set the active list. It tries to take all other possible issues in dispute off the table so we can hold our position, they can hold their position, and we can get the people's work done. It also has a total reservation of rights. But we thought, because, Fred, as you point out, no court has ever ruled on the casting vote, we are willing to say, when we have the chair, we're not going to attempt to vote twice and go to court. They're not going to attempt to vote twice. Let's get together on consensus bills and pass the local government bills so that the sales taxes continue, so that school governance can go forward in New York City. And that's our proposal. We're just it's simply a lawyerly effort to take issues off the table. I recognize that this is an issue that's never been resolved by the court. When we looked at it, I came away convinced that it's unlikely that a court will rule that the president pro tem has a second vote.
This would be a legitimate area for the court to weigh in on. It seems to me more than what was being asked of the court that just ruled on the question of the internal rules, because this is really an interpretation of the state constitution.
I think that's right. Yeah. This is something that I think would be a justiciable issue. I just think that it's unlikely to I don't think either side is likely to prevail with a claim that we get two votes.
Fair enough. Senator, as you heard, Senator John Sampson, when he was here, was saying that there has been no response so far from the Republican senators to the proposal that you put out last night. No effort to counteroffer or negotiations. What do you expect was going to happen today? Do you think it's just going to be another day of people walking around here and the Republicans going through the motions of having a Senate session? What do you think?
Well, no, I do think that the Republicans eventually have to come to the table because, and again, the key issue here that I think that sometimes has been missed in the news coverage is the power of the temporary president to set the active list. That's the list of bills that we vote on. They won't come to the floor to vote on an active list set by Malcolm Smith because that would be conceding he's the temporary president. We won't go to the floor to vote on an active list set by Pedro Espada because that would be conceding he's the president. Our proposal is to have a conference committee to set the active list. Let's just take the bills we have to pass to do the business of the people of this state and get back to work. I think they have to accept that sooner or later because they have counties upstate and downstate that they represent. Nassau County, for example, where their budget will be in ruins if we don't pass legislation. I don't think the Republicans will walk away from Albany when the session ends Monday, having put all of these local governments into bankruptcy. I think they will eventually come to the table.
Tactically, why haven't the Senate Democrats gone into the chamber the way the Senate Republicans have, and with an active list put out by Malcolm Smith, which you say would be a legitimate one, try to take some action on bills? Why don't you go into the Senate?
Well, because this is a charade. No, there's no way, and they've made it clear, there's no way they will vote on an active list generated by Malcolm Smith because that would be acknowledging that he is the president of the Senate.
Well, why not put it to the test and say put up some of the bills they want that affect their local counties so that they're in a position of having not showing up to vote on important bills?
I think that the problem is it would be a circus and a sham, just as their purported sessions are a circus. We have offered them every possible compromise to get us to the floor we're willing to put aside the dispute over who's the temporary president. They're not coming out to vote. If that would make me happy, but they've told us repeatedly they will not come out and concede that Malcolm is the temporary president. So we're trying to work out something that actually could get bills passed, not just a show. And as Senator Sampson indicated, we think the public's getting tired of everyone churning around up here without doing the people's business. And I would like to point out that if we end the session, the next step would be for Governor Patterson, to call us back into a special session. And for special sessions, he gets to set the legislative agenda. That may be what we come down to if the Republicans refuse to come forward.
But he could not make you go into the Senate chamber, and he could not determine who the leader would be. So while he could call you back, it still could be as awkward as it is now in terms of who goes first.
Well, it would, but I think what that would do is provide a list of bills, including the bills to save these local governments, that I think would be very hard for the Republicans to turn their nose at. I mean, we're willing to work out a bipartisan system for getting bills to the floor. If the governor has to call a special session and set that list, that may be what we come down to. It's too bad because that's the legislature yielding power to the executive, but the Republicans, maybe they've responded. Maybe today they will respond for it. I'm hopeful that a spirit of bipartisan compromise in the interests of the people of the state of New York will prevail.
Senator Eric Schneiderman of Manhattan, we thank you so much for coming in this morning. It's going to be a very interesting time. I assume it's also kind of a depressing time for people like yourself who came into the majority back in January with a lot of hopes, and I can't imagine that you thought it would end up like this. But thanks again for coming in.
Thank you.